You know, Renita, crossovers can be whatever anybody wants them to be. At the one end, you've got urban runabouts like the Venue and the Kicks, and at the other end, you've got a full-sized SUV. I still call them crossovers, but they can hold 6, 7, or 8 passengers.
And that's what we've got behind us here today. We are comparing the 2024 Mazda CX-90, putting it up against the 2024 Hyundai Palisade. Let's get in both of them.
Let's go.
I am not a huge fan. I think there's so much going on and so many different materials and colors, and this side to me doesn't really match the cloth that's here, and I hate the stitching up here because I just want to pick it and unthread it.
I hear you, but you know what? This has a, I don't know, it's an intangible that I'll call class. It just seems to say I'm rich.
It does seem more thought out.
I really did like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a lot of cars, yeah, comme ci, comme ça. As for the driving characteristics, you know, the two of them are so close, although this gets a lot more power, and most of the extra power comes from that electric motor that's housed between the engine and transmission. The thing that impressed me most of all was the fact that they managed to marry the engine and the electric motor together so well, you just do not notice the transition between the two. And that I loved. I just thought this was a better overall powertrain. As I say, an inline-6 is perfectly balanced, so this thing is as smooth gets. I really did like this powertrain.
This one is smooth, and I thought that while I was driving it, and then I got into the Palisade, and I'm not sure if it's because we were driving them back to back. When I got in the Palisade, the slightest budge of the steering wheel feels like you're shifting so much. It
needs more on-center latitude, so that, because I noticed that too, it's like it feels darty.
Yeah.
It darts left or it darts right. I agree with you totally there. The flip side, I found the suspension, it couldn't make up its mind what it wanted to be. Sometimes I just found it way too soft and willowy through a corner. Other times on the highway, it was just perfect. It was beautifully smooth. But it kept flip-flopping back and forth between too soft and just right. You know, it's like the Three Bears.
I think they are both comfortable. It's easy to find your seating configuration both as well. The seats are comfortable. I did find I like the Palisade a tiny bit better, but not so much that either would be a deal breaker. Like, I wouldn't say no to the CX-90 because the front seat wasn't comfortable.
I agree. I found seat comfort to be very much on par. You know, I have an odd-shaped body, and so if I can find comfort in the seat, 99% of the rest of the population will find it. So I enjoyed both. They're both very comfortable. They've got lots of support. Now let's move on to this thing that's in the middle of the car. And I refer to it as a thing because you cannot, no touchy. Why on earth Mazda feels the need to turn the touchscreen off the instant the car starts to move is beyond me. It drove me absolutely crazy. If I'd have had a hammer, we wouldn't have an infotainment screen, I can tell you that much. Now, when I found out that you can actually delve into the menu and switch on the touchscreen portion if you're using CarPlay, hallelujah, that was a saving grace. I really, you know, I mean, I use CarPlay all the time, and without the touchscreen, you can never quite sure which one you're scrolling through. And eventually you see, if you're trying to start the menu, for instance, or start navigation, you typically push start and away you go. This thing, you've got to scroll through until you find the touch portion, and then beautiful. Yeah. The Hyundai, absolutely no issue whatsoever. I think they've got that thing sorted. It's the format gives everything lots of breathing space. There's nice large icons. So I really thought that the thumbs up to Hyundai for what they've done for the infotainment screen. Shame on you, Mazda, for not having touch all the time.
Palisade, I do think the infotainment system is a lot simpler, and because that screen is a little more not as wide, it's got everything showing right in front of you. There's more space for you to see all the icons right up front. But the good thing about the Mazda is that You can wirelessly connect to Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You can't do that in the Palisade. You need the cord still. I'm not a huge fan of the trim being 2+2+2 because I'm not really sure why you would want a 2+2+2. I can understand that most people who have a 3-row aren't going to use that 3rd row 100% of the time. I will say that one of the things I didn't like about this one is that it's hard for my kids to get to the back. That 2nd row, the captain's chairs are pretty heavy, so my kids can't get into the back on their own. I have to go and help them get in. Then the other thing is, if you have 2 little kids, which I don't have 2 very little kids anymore, then you've got 2 big car seats, and if they're strapped in to both of these, you can't move it. You can slightly pull it up a little bit, but you can't get someone into the back seat without physically taking out those car seats, and I hate that.
I was actually quite surprised that in so many 3-row vehicles, the 3rd row really isn't a 3rd row. It's kind of there because it beats walking in the rain. The rest of the time you wouldn't use it. And these two, I was quite surprised. There was, I found decent room. I think the Palisade has the edge over this CX-90, but the point I'm trying to make is that both of them have got a usable 3rd row, which is not the case with very many of these.
Yeah, it really is. And I've been in a couple where even my son, who's 7, his legs can't fit in that 3rd row, which makes no sense. Then who is going to fit?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And then cargo space, obviously, if you've got that 3rd row up, it's super limited. All 3-row vehicles are limited in cargo space when you have that 3rd row up. The Palisade has a bit more space, but it's not so much usable space because they measure it going up and the whole volume of it, and it's not like I'm going to be back there stacking groceries up. You just want space at the bottom. But luckily they both have that. The seat has in here it's the 50-50 split because there's only 2 seats in the 3rd row, and then in the Palisade it's the 40-60 split, so you can still get a little bit of access to extra cargo space without putting all those back seats down.
In either this or the Palisade, you can seat 5 very comfortably and have one half of the rear seat down, so you actually now have some usable cargo space. Your point's very well taken. Yeah, no, I mean the similarities, the number of seats, the way they drive, they both got nice, good powertrains. The V6 in the Palisade is strong and quite frankly bulletproof. It's been around for a while. It's not going to let you down. This thing, inline 6, they're smooth, they're great. This thing's got the advantage of having the electric motor. It's not a full-on hybrid, but it is a mild hybrid, and so you get some advantage of having the electrics. Now, interestingly, it seems as though Mazda use the electrics more for motivation than they do for fuel saving, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, here we go. The instant you get into this thing, you notice that the materials are much more subdued than the materials you find in the CX-9. Very classy nonetheless, but just very muted colors and very conservative.
I know a lot of people like those beige tan colors that set the interior apart from the other ones, but I actually, on the inside, I don't mind these darker colors. On the outside, I like when there's different paint colors. This white is so fits in with every other car on the street.
It was quite interesting when we switched cars and I was driving the CX-90. I was quite taken with the use of materials. It's almost adventurous the way that they're using the materials, because I do agree with you. I think it's only a matter of time before little Johnny gets in there and pick, and the next thing you know, all the dash is falling off because he's cut the thread. But well, yeah, or you. But no, very nice, and I think Hyundai have done a bang-up job with the infotainment system. No need for any controls, but they have the important ones: a volume knob, and a control knob. And the rest of it, thank you very much. I can do it with voice or I can do it with touch. And the biggest difference, even though you can make the Mazda touch when you're using Apple CarPlay, I found the screen to be quite a long way back. They brought the touch screen right to the front, so even if you're fairly short, you can still reach it.
But that's because it's not meant to be touchscreen, so they didn't mind putting it back there.
Yeah, you know what, you're probably right. And it's only after the fact, when they realized that people were having problems using Apple CarPlay, that they went that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I do like this screen, and I like that it's bigger and that when you do swipe over to all the icons, they're nice and big icons. And if you're driving, you don't feel like you're gonna miss one of them. And it's not super sensitive, and it's not like, I know there have been a couple times in other cars where you tap something and then you check it and you realize you didn't tap it and you gotta tap a little harder.
Yeah.
This one's got a good sensitivity.
Yes, I agree. And you know, some manufacturers have the need to put this haptic feedback in the screen to say that you've actually touched something. Why?
I don't know, because the other thing is, I don't even think that necessarily means that you've touched what you want. It's just that you've touched the screen.
Yes, exactly. I don't get it. But this thing, very nicely laid out. I wasn't a fan of the push button shifter, but compared to the CX-90, where you actually have to move the shifter physically to the left to engage park, I found pushing the P button much easier.
Same.
Excuse my French.
I do think, though, in the CX-90, at the very least, if you own it, you'll get used to it. It's not a deal breaker, but it's just not preferable.
No, but you know, the thing is, though, right? First impressions is what people buy a vehicle on, right?
Yeah,
so when they go to the
true.
dealership, they get in, and you've got that one chance to make a good first impression. Well, if somebody forgets to move it to the left and they take their foot off the brake and end up backing up, that's not a particularly good first impression, you know? I guess it depends how you look at it. If you turn it off, I noticed it does go straight into park, which I thought was much better. Now this thing here, going on about, you were talking about the steering.
Yeah.
I found the same thing, and especially on the highway, I found I was putting in constant little tiny corrections just to keep it on the straight and narrow, and if you did dial off slightly, it moves quite quickly off the straight ahead position, which I just found it a little too touchy.
Yeah, but both systems actually have a pretty good lane keep assist.
Being warned that you're straying is fabulous, you know, and steering correction is even better, and that's both of them. This one's got the highway drive assist or whatever they call it, and a great thing. What I found interesting about this thing, I really learned to appreciate, I think they call it side view, where when you put the turn signal on, the view to that side shows up in the dash, and it works fabulously well until you run into rain like we did yesterday.
Yeah.
When that happens, it's like snorkeling with a mask full of water. You can't see a darn thing. All you see is rainwater rushing across the instrument panel. You'd think they'd protect the lens a little better so you didn't get that. You know, as I say, it's perfect in nice weather and it's redundant in wet weather.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure if it's supposed to take away from the fact that you should still turn your head and check behind you. But for me, when I turn back, and I guess this is a me problem more than a general population problem because I'm short, but when I turn back, this A-pillar right here blocks a huge portion of like my sight there. So I don't know, I kind of, I don't want to say I rely on that little display on the dash, but it does help to kind of confirm that nobody's back there.
No, I agree with your sentiments about how much easier it is to get back into the third row in this vehicle. I think overall there's more space. I mean, the CX-90 is sleeker and I think easier on the eye than this thing because it's rather it's a traditional two-box, one for the engine, one for the people. So it's a straight two-box design. But that does give it more utility and ease of operation, which, you know, you made very good points that this thing if you're looking for family friendly, this wins
Yeah.
all the time.
I will say though, this is also offered as an 8-seater, and if you have those 3 seats there, I imagine you'd have the same issue as the CX-90. You'd have to pull 1 seat down in order to get back there, and if you've got car seats strapped in, then you're back to the same problem. So
Yeah, because this one doesn't have the center console, so you have the ease of walkthrough, which I think is, for me, it makes a lot of sense because it's easy to get back there. You know, there's nothing wrong with the Mazda system other than the fact that when there's a child seat in it, it becomes redundant. But, you know, both are fully functional. It's just that one is easier to live with on an everyday basis than the other.
Yep.
You know, you go back a number of years and these things were dreadful, and now you fast forward to today and there's 2 really good vehicles. Really good vehicles. What surprised me is that both of us made the same comment, and that was that if we could, we'd take the Kia Telluride.
Yes. Yeah.
And you added in the Grand Highlander for your pick. I've yet to drive that, but I can see your point. This thing has got nice Napa leather, so it has the class factor, but it doesn't feel quite as delicate as the CX-90.
Yeah.
You know, the CX-90 is beautiful leather, and absolutely no question about that. But the light color means that it's going to get dirty easier and all this stuff. This just seems to be a more functional interior if you've got kids.
Yeah.
And that's where these things are mainly aimed, right?
Yeah, one thing we haven't talked about is the price, and both of them are pretty similarly priced, at least in these higher trims. Both of them are over $60,000 before freight and delivery charges.
Very, very similar vehicles in many respects, but totally different vehicles in even more respects.
Yeah.
And yet, to the penny, the pricing is almost the same. Okay, moment of truth. Which way did you go, Renita?
It was a tough decision because both of these cars are pretty good and they both have a desired audience, if you will. For me, I think my winner was the Palisade. There's a little bit more practicality for me having 3 kids, and it's easier to jump into the back, especially with these 2 specific trims.
I understand exactly what you're saying about the Palisade. It does have elbow room and it does feel more flexible. But you know, I ended up going with the CX-90. I preferred the drive. It handles very nicely. Some will find it a little too firm, but generally speaking, I found it very comfortable. I like the interior. It's classy all the way. But what saved its bacon was the fact that I found out you can actually have a touchscreen when you're using Apple CarPlay. That was the deal maker, not the breaker.
For Driving.ca, I'm Renita Narain.
And I'm Graham Fletcher.
And for more news and reviews, check us out on Driving.ca or follow us on social media.